My name is Octavio, 29 years old, working as a freelance graphic designer in Seattle. Last month, I opened my mailbox to find a birthday card from my parents. Inside, just 7 words. Maybe next year we'll celebrate properly. Love, Mom and Dad. Meanwhile, my younger brother Leo was enjoying a luxury ski weekend in Aspen, their gift to him. The contrast hit me like a punch to the gut, awakening years of buried pain. Before I tell you about the decision that changed my life forever, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever felt overlooked by the people who should value you most. Growing up in the Ramirez household meant living with high expectations. My father, Richard, built his real estate empire from nothing, becoming one of Seattle's most successful executives. His face regularly appeared in business magazines, his name spoken with respect in professional circles. My mother, Eleanor, established herself as a renowned cosmetic surgeon, catering to the elite of the Pacific Northwest. Both my parents were pillars of success, their achievements casting long shadows. Then there was Leo, my brother, 4 years younger, and seemingly perfect in every way. By 24, he had graduated from Harvard Law School with honors, immediately landing a position at a prestigious law firm in Seattle. His academic achievements lined the walls of my parents' home, trophies, certificates, and photos with influential people. Leo was everything my parents had hoped for in a son. And then there was me, the firstborn, the disappointment. From an early age, I showed an aptitude for art and design rather than business or medicine. My sketchbooks filled faster than my math workbooks. While my father spent weekends teaching Leo about investment portfolios and real estate markets, I would be in my room, creating digital art or designing logos for imaginary companies. My passion for visual storytelling wasn't something my parents could understand or value. Art is a hobby, Octavio, not a career, my father would say whenever I brought up my interests. You need something stable, something that builds wealth and status. My mother was gentler, but ultimately aligned with my father's vision. Darling, medicine or law provides security. Your sketches are lovely, but how will they support you? Despite their pressure, I chose to study graphic design in college instead of business or pre-med. The day I announced my decision was the first time I saw genuine disappointment in my father's eyes. He didn't argue or yell. His silence was worse. He simply nodded and walked away, as if I had confirmed a long-held suspicion that I would never meet his standards. My mother tried to play mediator, but her efforts were half-hearted at best. Your father wants what's best for you, she would say. Give him time. But that time never seemed to come. Instead, I watched as their attention, pride, and resources flowed toward Leo. The difference in how we were treated became most apparent during birthdays and special occasions. For my 16th birthday, I received a professional set of drawing supplies. Nice, but practical. For Leo's 16th, they surprised him with a brand new BMW. My high school graduation gift was a laptop for college. Leo got a month-long trip to Europe. I tried not to resent Leo. It wasn't his fault that he naturally gravitated toward the paths our parents valued. He was smart, ambitious, and charming, perfectly suited to follow in our father's footsteps. And to his credit, Leo never flaunted their favoritism, though he didn't exactly recognize it either. Throughout my 20s, I worked to build my own path. I took internships at design firms, built a portfolio, and eventually established myself as a freelance designer. My clients appreciated my work, and I slowly built a reputation in Seattle's creative community. But no matter what I accomplished, it never seemed to register with my parents as real success. At family dinners, the conversation would revolve around Leo's cases or my father's business deals. If I mentioned landing a new client or winning a small design award, I'd receive polite nods before the topic quickly shifted back. I became skilled at predicting these moments, at seeing the fleeting attention before their eyes would glaze over, waiting for a chance to return to subjects they deemed worthwhile. I tried to convince myself that their approval didn't matter, that I was building my life on my terms. But deep down, their dismissal of my choices left a wound that never fully healed. I kept showing up to family events, kept making an effort, kept hoping that someday they would see value in the path I had chosen. By my 29th birthday, I had created a life that felt almost like a sanctuary from my family's expectations. My apartment in Seattle was small but filled with artwork and plants, a space that reflected who I was rather than who I was supposed to be. I had built a stable client base that allowed me financial independence, even if I wasn't wealthy by my parents' standards. My girlfriend Sarah had been in my life for nearly 2 years. She was a kindergarten teacher who valued creativity and emotional intelligence, qualities my family had never prioritized. With her warm smile and quiet strength, she brought balance to my life. Sarah understood my family dynamics, without me having to explain the painful details. Beyond Sarah, I had found a chosen family in my friends Marcus and Jessica. Marcus, a musician I met at a local coffee shop, became the brother I wished Leo could have been, supportive, understanding, and genuinely interested in my work. Jessica, a writer I collaborated with on several projects, always knew when to offer advice and when to simply listen. Unlike at my parents' house, with Marcus and Jessica, I never felt the need to justify my existence or my choices. As my birthday approached, I tried to keep expectations low. Previous years had taught me that my parents might remember with a text or a card, but rarely much more. Still, a small part of me hoped that this year might be different. 3 days before my birthday, I received a text from Leo that inadvertently twisted the knife. It was a selfie from Aspen, showing him on a ski lift against a backdrop of snow-covered mountains. "Best birthday gift ever," his message read. "Mom and Dad rented this entire chalet for the weekend. The private ski instructor is amazing. Wish you could see this view in person, bro." I stared at my phone, a familiar heaviness settling in my chest. Leo's birthday had been last month. They had planned and executed this elaborate celebration for him. Meanwhile, I hadn't heard a word about any plans for my birthday. I typed back a simple, "Looks amazing, have fun," and put my phone away. On the morning of my birthday, Sarah surprised me with breakfast in bed and a thoughtfully chosen book on design theory I had been eyeing. Later, Marcus and Jessica took me out for lunch, presenting me with concert tickets for a band we all loved. My day was filled with small, meaningful gestures from people who valued me. When I returned home that evening, I found an envelope in my mailbox with my parents' address in the corner. My heart did a small, hopeful jump. I opened it while standing in the hallway of my apartment building. The card was simple, store-bought, with a generic "Happy Birthday, Son" printed on the front. Inside, my mother's neat handwriting, "Happy birthday, Octavio. Maybe next year we'll celebrate properly. Love, Mom and Dad." No personal message. No explanation of what properly might entail. No mention of wanting to see me or spend time together. Just a vague promise of something better next year. A promise I had heard in various forms for most of my life. I sat down on my couch, card in hand, when my phone lit up with a FaceTime call from Leo. I almost didn't answer, but guilt won out. "Happy birthday, big bro." Leo's face appeared, flushed from cold mountain air. Behind him, I could see a lavish lodge with a roaring fireplace. "Sorry I couldn't be there today, but I'm still enjoying the afterglow of this incredible trip Mom and Dad planned." He launched into a detailed description of his luxury weekend, the private cabin, the gourmet meals, the expensive champagne our parents had arranged, all while seemingly oblivious to the fact that I had received nothing comparable. "Oh, and you wouldn't believe the watch Dad gave me before we left," Leo continued, extending his wrist to show a gleaming timepiece that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. "Said it was for winning my first big case." "That's great," I managed, forcing enthusiasm I didn't feel. "I'm glad you had such an amazing time. So what are Mom and Dad doing for your birthday?" Leo asked, finally. "Anything special?" "Just a card this year," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. Oh. A flicker of awareness crossed Leo's face, but it disappeared quickly. Well, they've been really busy with Dad's new development project. I'm sure they'll make it up to you. After we hung up, I sat in silence. The contrast between our experiences couldn't have been clearer. But what hurt most wasn't the expensive gifts or fancy trips Leo received. It was the time, thought, and effort my parents invested in celebrating him while treating my birthday as an afterthought. Later that evening, my mother called. I hoped for an explanation, perhaps an invitation to dinner the following weekend, to make up for the missed birthday. "Octavio, happy birthday," she said, her voice distracted. "Did you get our card?" "I did, thanks," I replied, waiting for more. Good. Listen, I can't talk long. Your father and I are headed to a dinner with the hospital board. Did Leo call you from Aspen? Wasn't that a wonderful surprise we planned for him? He's been working so hard at the firm, and when he won that case last month, well, we just had to do something special. She continued talking about Leo's accomplishments, never once acknowledging that today was supposed to be about me. When she finally paused for breath, I simply said, "I should go. Sarah's waiting to take me to dinner." "Oh, you're still seeing that kindergarten teacher? That's nice, dear. Tell her hello from us. We really should meet her properly sometime." Sarah and I had been together for almost 2 years. They had met her 3 times. During dinner at my favorite restaurant, Sarah noticed my distraction. "Your parents again?" she asked gently. I showed her the card. Sarah read it, her expression darkening. "Octavio, you know this isn't right, don't you? This pattern with your family. It's not normal or healthy." "They're just busy," I said automatically. "And Leo's accomplishments are more aligned with what they value." Sarah took my hand across the table. "Stop making excuses for them. I've watched this for 2 years now. They consistently prioritize Leo while treating you as an afterthought. A birthday card saying, 'Maybe next year,' while they're literally throwing a luxury weekend for your brother? That's not being busy. That's being deliberately hurtful." Her words landed like a revelation. I had spent so long normalizing their behavior that I couldn't see how truly unbalanced it was. Sarah was right. This wasn't just about different levels of success or them being busy. This was a pattern of valuing one son over the other, regardless of circumstances. "You deserve better," Sarah said, squeezing my hand. "And at some point, you need to decide if you're going to keep accepting scraps of their attention while hoping for change." The weeks following my birthday became increasingly painful as I began to notice patterns I had previously rationalized away. It started when I was scrolling through Instagram and came across a post from my mother. It was a professional photograph of Leo in front of his law firm, captioned, "So proud of our son and his incredible accomplishments. The future is bright for this rising star." I couldn't remember the last time either of my parents had publicly acknowledged any of my achievements. When I had won a regional design award the previous year, there had been no social media posts, no proud announcements at family gatherings. Just a brief, "That's nice, dear," from my mother during our monthly phone call. But the real shock came when I visited my childhood friend Thomas, who lived in the same neighborhood as Leo. As we caught up over coffee, Thomas casually mentioned, "Your brother's new place is incredible. Your parents really hooked him up, huh?" "What do you mean?" I asked. Thomas looked confused. "The downtown condo? I ran into your dad there last month when he was helping Leo move in some furniture. Your dad mentioned they helped with the down payment as a graduation gift." My coffee turned bitter in my mouth. 2 years earlier, I had approached my parents about help with a down payment on a small studio apartment. The property was modestly priced, and I had saved half the down payment myself. My father had flatly refused. "Real estate is an investment, Octavio," he had lectured. "And frankly, your career choice doesn't inspire confidence in your financial future. When you have a more stable income, we can discuss property ownership." Yet they had purchased a downtown condo for Leo without hesitation. The disparity was so stark that it took my breath away. That evening, my Aunt Amy called to catch up. As my mother's younger sister and something of a black sheep herself, Amy had always shown me special kindness. During our conversation, she unknowingly twisted the knife further. "Your mom was showing me pictures of Leo's Aspen trip last week," Amy said. "They've been planning that for at least 6 months. Your father was so excited about finding that specific resort, apparently. It's where some famous lawyer he admires once stayed. 6 months. They had been planning Leo's birthday extravaganza for half a year, while my birthday warranted nothing more than a last-minute card. I began to mentally catalog other instances. The time my parents had claimed they couldn't attend my first gallery showing because of prior commitments, only to discover later they had attended one of Leo's routine court appearances that same day. The family dinners where my father would question my pricing structure and client base, while praising Leo's every minor victory at the firm. The way my mother would introduce Leo as our son, the attorney, while I was simply our older son. The pain of these realizations kept me awake at night. I found myself withdrawing, turning down family dinner invitations with vague excuses about work deadlines. Sarah noticed my growing depression but didn't push. She simply offered her steady presence and understanding. Finally, I confided in Marcus and Jessica during one of our weekly get-togethers. We sat on Marcus's rooftop patio, the Seattle skyline glittering before us, as I poured out my frustrations and hurt. "You need to confront them," Marcus said firmly, after listening to everything. "This has been going on for years, and it's destroying you from the inside out." Jessica nodded in agreement. My sister was the golden child in our family too. The favoritism didn't stop until I finally called it out directly. "What if that makes things worse?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "What if I confront them, and they just confirm what I've always suspected, that they genuinely value Leo more?" "Then at least you'll know," Marcus replied. "And knowing is better than this constant state of hope and disappointment. Either they'll recognize what they're doing and try to change, or they won't. But either way, you can stop living in this limbo." Sarah offered similar advice when I discussed it with her that night. "I'm worried about what this continued rejection is doing to you," she said, stroking my hair as we lay in bed. "But whatever you decide, I'm here." I spent a week crafting what I would say, trying to find words that expressed my hurt without accusation. Finally, I scheduled a video call with both my parents, telling them I had something important to discuss. They appeared on screen from their immaculate living room, my father in his customary button-down shirt, my mother with her perfect hair and subtle makeup. They looked mildly curious but not particularly concerned. "What's this about, Octavio?" my father asked immediately. "We're meeting the Hendersons for dinner in an hour." I took a deep breath. I wanted to talk about something that's been bothering me for a long time. "I feel there's a significant difference in how you treat Leo and me." My father's expression instantly hardened, while my mother's smile became fixed. "What exactly do you mean?" she asked. "I mean the luxury birthday trip you planned for months for Leo, while I got a card saying maybe next year. I mean helping him buy a condo, when you refused to help me with a much smaller down payment. I mean consistently celebrating his achievements while barely acknowledging mine." My father leaned forward. "Is this really what you scheduled this call for? To complain that your brother gets nicer birthday presents?" "Richard," my mother murmured, placing a hand on his arm. "Let him speak." But my father was already building momentum. "Let me be clear, Octavio. Your brother works 80-hour weeks in a prestigious profession that we can be proud of. He's following a path with a clear trajectory toward success. What exactly have you accomplished with your drawings?" "I've built a successful freelance business," I countered, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I've won awards. I have clients who respect my work and pay well for it. Playing around on a computer isn't a real career," my father snapped. "When Leo was your age, he had already finished law school and was making 6 figures. What's your excuse?" My mother tried to intervene. What your father means is that we're still concerned about your long-term stability, Octavio. Leo's path is more established. So, you admit you value his choices more than mine? It's not about value, she said quickly. It's about practicality. Leo's career comes with certain guarantees. This isn't just about careers, I insisted. It's about how you consistently prioritize Leo in every aspect of our relationship. The time you spend with him, the interest you show in his life, the way you celebrate his milestones while ignoring mine. My father's patience visibly snapped. When you achieve something worth celebrating, we'll celebrate it. Until then, stop complaining that we recognize real accomplishment when we see it. The call ended shortly after, with my mother promising to talk more later, and my father barely saying goodbye. I sat at my desk, shaking with a mixture of anger and vindication. My worst fears had been confirmed. In their eyes, I would never measure up to Leo, regardless of what I achieved in my chosen field. As painful as the conversation had been, it brought a strange clarity. For years, I had blamed myself for not earning their approval. Now I understood that their approval was conditional on becoming someone I had never wanted to be. 2 weeks after our disastrous video call, my mother texted to invite me to a family dinner celebrating Leo's first major courtroom victory. "It would mean a lot to your brother if you could be there," she wrote, making no mention of our previous conversation. I considered declining, but ultimately decided to go. Perhaps seeing them in person would provide an opportunity to continue our discussion in a more productive way. Besides, I didn't want Leo to think I was punishing him for our parents' behavior. The evening was set for Friday, at my parents' waterfront home. I arrived exactly on time, bottle of wine in hand, stomach knotted with anxiety. My mother greeted me at the door with her usual air kiss beside my cheek. "Octavio, good to see you," she said, taking the wine without really looking at it. "Everyone's in the living room." Everyone turned out to include not just my parents and Leo, but also my father's business partner Walter and his wife, plus 2 senior partners from Leo's law firm. It wasn't just a family dinner. It was a networking event, disguised as a celebration. Leo spotted me and bounded over, genuinely pleased to see me. Despite everything, Leo had never been deliberately cruel or dismissive. He simply existed in the warm spotlight our parents directed at him, unaware of the shadows it cast on me. "Octavio, you made it," he exclaimed, pulling me into a quick hug. "I wasn't sure you'd come after." "Well, Mom mentioned you've been busy, so they hadn't told him about our confrontation." "Interesting. Wouldn't miss it," I said, forcing a smile. "Congratulations on the case." The evening proceeded, as countless family gatherings had before. My father dominated conversation, alternating between business discussions with Walter and proud declarations about Leo to the law partners. My mother floated between guests, refilling wine glasses and inserting perfectly timed comments about Leo's achievements from childhood onward. I sat quietly, answering direct questions, but otherwise fading into the background. The senior partners barely acknowledged my existence after learning I was in graphic design rather than law or business. One actually walked away mid-conversation when my father called him over to hear about Leo's courtroom strategy. Dinner was served at the massive dining table overlooking the Sound. My mother had prepared Leo's favorites: prime rib, truffle mashed potatoes, and asparagus with hollandaise. The conversation continued to revolve around Leo's case, my father's latest development project, and connections between the legal and real estate worlds. Not once did anyone ask about my work, my life, or my interests. As dessert was being served, a custom cake from Leo's favorite bakery, decorated with scales of justice in fondant. My father stood and tapped his glass for attention. "I'd like to propose a toast," he announced, his commanding presence silencing the table immediately. "To Leo, who has proven himself to be everything a father could hope for in a son. Your mother and I couldn't be prouder of the man you've become." Everyone raised their glasses. I mechanically lifted mine, the wine bitter on my tongue. And to celebrate this first major victory, which I'm certain will be one of many, my father continued, your mother and I have a little surprise. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key fob with a familiar luxury car brand logo. The new model you've been admiring. It's parked in the garage. Leo's eyes widened in genuine shock and delight. The table erupted in congratulatory exclamations while I sat frozen, remembering how my father had lectured me about fiscal responsibility when I'd mentioned wanting to upgrade my 10-year-old sedan. And that's not all, my mother added, practically glowing. We've been in discussions with our financial advisor, and we've decided to help you with that waterfront property you've had your eye on. It's time you had a home that reflects your status. The waterfront property. Leo had mentioned it during our last phone call, a $2 million house that he might consider if he made partner in a few years. Meanwhile, I was still renting because my parents had deemed me too financially unstable for property ownership. The room felt suddenly airless. I gripped my napkin under the table, knuckles white, as everyone congratulated Leo on his incredible good fortune. No one seemed to notice my silence until my Aunt Amy, who had arrived late and missed my earlier interactions, innocently brought reality crashing into the celebration. "This is so generous of you both," she said to my parents. "Especially after Octavio mentioned you weren't able to help with his apartment down payment a while back. It's wonderful that things have changed." A leaden silence fell over the table. My mother's smile became brittle, while my father's expression darkened. Leo looked between us all, confused. "What apartment?" he asked. "Octavio, were you looking to buy?" I couldn't meet anyone's eyes. "It was a couple of years ago. Just a small studio downtown. We explained to Octavio that the timing wasn't right," my father said dismissively. "Financial situations change." "In 2 years?" Amy pressed, oblivious to the tension. "But I remember you bought that vacation property in Whistler, around the same time you told Octavio no." I could have kissed my aunt for her inadvertent truth-telling, even as I cringed at the open conflict it created. Leo was looking increasingly uncomfortable, while my father's face had flushed with anger. "Amy, this isn't the time," my mother said sharply, but Leo wouldn't let it go. "Wait, you guys turned Octavio down for help with an apartment, but you're offering to help me buy a house that costs way more? That doesn't seem fair." He was trying to defend me, in his way, but his words only highlighted how oblivious he had been to our parents' favoritism all these years. "It's not about fair," my father snapped. "It's about investment. Leo has proven himself. His career trajectory justifies the investment. And mine doesn't," I said quietly, finally looking up to meet my father's gaze. The table fell silent again. The law partners and Walter exchanged awkward glances, clearly wishing they could escape this family drama. "Octavio," my father said, his voice controlled but ice-cold, "this is neither the time nor the place." "When is the time, Dad?" I asked, surprising myself with my calm. "When have you ever made time to discuss how differently you treat your sons?" My mother attempted to salvage the situation. "Octavio, please. This is Leo's celebration. We can talk about this later." "No, I want to understand," Leo interjected, looking genuinely distressed. "Have I been getting special treatment all this time without realizing it?" My father slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses jump. "Enough. Leo, you haven't gotten special treatment. You've gotten what you've earned through hard work and smart choices. Octavio chose a different path, one with different rewards." "Just say it, Dad," I said, years of pain crystallizing into this moment of clarity. "Say what you really think. I chose wrong, and you've been punishing me for it ever since." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, with the law partners and Walter still at the table, my father finally spoke the truth he had implied, but never stated directly. "Fine. Yes, I'm disappointed in your choices, Octavio. You had every advantage, every opportunity, and you chose to throw it away on a career drawing pictures. Why would I invest in that? Why would I celebrate mediocrity?" Leo understood what it means to be part of this family, to build on the foundation we provided. You rejected all of it. Even knowing this was how he felt, hearing it spoken aloud sent a physical pain through my chest. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, but she didn't contradict him. "Richard," she said weakly. "No, Eleanor. He wanted honesty," my father continued. "Leo deserves what we give him because he's proven himself worthy of it. He respects our values, our work ethic. He's continuing what we built instead of rejecting it." I looked at my mother, giving her one last chance to defend me. Instead, she said, "We've always loved you both, but Leo's choices have been easier to understand, to support. He needs different things from us, because he's working so hard toward goals we recognize as valuable." The truth I had suspected for years was finally confirmed, witnessed by a table full of strangers. My brother looked stricken, my aunt outraged, but all I felt was a strange, empty relief. At least now there was no more pretending. I stood up, placing my napkin beside my half-eaten dessert. "Thank you for your honesty," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Congratulations on your case, Leo. Enjoy your new car and house." I walked out without looking back, ignoring my mother's calls and Leo's confused protest. Driving home that night, I felt both shattered and strangely liberated. The illusion was finally broken. I could stop trying to earn love that was conditional on becoming someone I had never wanted to be. The week after the disastrous dinner, I retreated into myself. I ignored calls from my mother and Leo, focusing instead on my client projects with an almost manic intensity. Work became my refuge, the one place where my value was recognized, where what I created mattered on its own merits. Sarah came over most evenings, bringing dinner or simply sitting with me in comfortable silence while I worked. She didn't push me to talk about what had happened, but her steady presence was a balm to my wounded spirit. "They've made their choice clear," I finally told her one night as we sat on my small balcony watching the city lights. "They value Leo and the path he's chosen. Nothing I do will ever measure up." Sarah took my hand, her expression solemn. "Then maybe it's time you made a choice too. Not about trying to please them, but about what you need to heal and move forward." "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said carefully, "that sometimes we need physical distance to gain emotional perspective. As long as you're here, in their orbit, you'll keep getting pulled back into the same patterns." Her words resonated with something that had been forming in the back of my mind, a sense that Seattle itself had become associated with my feelings of inadequacy and rejection. The next day, Marcus and Jessica came over, armed with pizza and concern. They had heard fragments of what happened from Sarah and wanted to check on me directly. "I've been thinking about making a change," I told them as we sat around my living room. "A big one." "What kind of change?" Jessica asked. I hesitated, the idea still taking shape. Maybe leaving Seattle, starting fresh somewhere else, where I'm not constantly reminded of being the disappointing son. Rather than discouraging me, my friends exchanged thoughtful looks. "Where would you go?" Marcus asked. "I don't know yet. New York, maybe? The design scene there is incredible." "Would Sarah go with you?" Jessica asked. "We haven't discussed it," I admitted. "It's just an idea right now." Marcus leaned forward. "Look, Octavio, I've known you for years. You're talented, hardworking, and one of the most genuine people I know. If your parents can't see that, it's their monumental loss. But don't let their blindness define your life or limit your opportunities." "Marcus is right," Jessica added. "And sometimes a fresh start is exactly what you need to see yourself clearly, without the distorted mirror your family holds up." Their support gave me courage. That night, I began researching design firms in New York City. I updated my portfolio, focusing on my strongest work. And for the first time in years, I felt a spark of excitement about the future. Within days, I had identified several agencies that aligned with my style and values. Crafting personalized cover letters for each, I emphasized both my technical skills and my understanding of brand storytelling. Then I submitted my applications and tried to focus on current projects while waiting for responses. To my surprise, 3 firms expressed interest within a week. 2 scheduled video interviews, while the third, Archer & Wolf, a boutique agency known for its innovative campaigns, requested additional portfolio samples. The interviews went well, particularly the one with Archer & Wolf. The creative director, Natalie, seemed genuinely impressed with my work and approach. "Your perspective is fresh," she said toward the end of our conversation. "We've been looking for someone who can bridge traditional design principles with contemporary digital applications. When could you start, if offered the position?" The question caught me off guard. "I would need to arrange things here. Maybe a month?" She nodded. "That's reasonable. We'll be in touch soon." 3 days later, I received the offer letter from Archer & Wolf. The salary was 20% higher than my current average income, with benefits I hadn't had as a freelancer. More importantly, it represented possibility, a new chapter untainted by my parents' disappointment. I accepted immediately. Then came the hardest conversation, telling Sarah. We sat at our favorite coffee shop, the same one where we'd had our first date nearly 2 years before. "I got the job in New York," I said after ordering our drinks. "They want me to start in 4 weeks. Sarah was quiet for a moment, stirring her latte. "I knew you would," she finally said. "You're too talented for them to pass up." "What does this mean for us?" I asked, the question that had been weighing on me since submitting the applications. She looked up, her eyes clear and direct. "I think we try long distance for a while. See how it feels. My teaching position here is secure, and I love my students. But I love you too, Octavio." "I don't want to lose you," I admitted. "Then don't," she said simply. "This doesn't have to be an ending. It could be a transition. Give yourself time to establish your new life, to heal from everything that's happened here. I'll visit. We'll talk every day. And in a year, we'll reassess." Her practicality and understanding nearly undid me. I had expected ultimatums or tears, not this measured support. With that settled, I began the process of dismantling my Seattle life. I gave notice to my landlord, started selling furniture I wouldn't take with me, and informed my regular clients of my impending move. Some were disappointed but understood. Others offered to continue working with me remotely. As my departure date approached, I found myself faced with the question of what to tell my family. Leo had called several times, leaving increasingly concerned messages. My mother had texted repeatedly, her messages oscillating between guilt-inducing, "We miss you," and dismissive, "You're being overly sensitive." My father maintained his characteristic silence. After much consideration, I decided to write them letters, rather than attempting another confrontation. For Leo, I was honest but gentle, explaining that I needed space to build my own identity away from the family dynamic. I assured him that my issues were primarily with our parents, not him, though I did note that his obliviousness to their favoritism had sometimes been hurtful. For my parents, I wrote separate letters. To my mother, I expressed my sadness at her failure to see me as equal to Leo, while acknowledging her attempts, however flawed, to mediate between my father and me. To my father, I was more direct, stating clearly that his conditional love had damaged our relationship, perhaps beyond repair, but that I was moving forward to build a life where my worth wasn't measured against his narrow definition of success. I mailed the letters 3 days before my flight, timing it so they would arrive after I had left. It was perhaps cowardly, but the thought of another confrontation or tearful goodbye felt impossible to bear. On my final night in Seattle, Marcus and Jessica threw me a small going-away party. Sarah stayed over afterward, both of us aware of the uncertainty ahead, but choosing to focus on the present moment. Early the next morning, I boarded a one-way flight to New York, carrying 2 suitcases and a backpack containing my laptop and essential design tools. As the plane took off, I watched Seattle recede beneath me, The Space Needle, the sound, the mountains in the distance, all the familiar landmarks of a life I was leaving behind. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness, not yet, but the quiet certainty that I was finally taking control of my own story. New York greeted me with its characteristic intensity, a symphony of noise, movement, and possibility. My first day in the city was a blur of sensation. The honking taxis, the diverse crowds pushing past one another on crowded sidewalks, the towering buildings that made Seattle's skyline seem modest by comparison. I had rented a small studio apartment in Brooklyn, sight unseen, relying on video tours and the recommendation of a college friend who lived nearby. The space was tiny compared to my Seattle apartment, barely 400 square feet, but it had character: exposed brick walls, large windows that flooded the space with morning light, and proximity to a park where I could sketch during my free time. After a whirlwind weekend of unpacking and basic furniture shopping, Monday arrived with the nervous anticipation of my first day at Archer & Wolf. The agency occupied the top 2 floors of a converted warehouse in Chelsea, all industrial chic with concrete floors, open ceilings, and glass-walled conference rooms. Natalie, the creative director who had hired me, gave me a tour before introducing me to the team. "Everyone here was impressed with your portfolio," she mentioned, as we walked through the space. "Especially the campaign you did for that local coffee roaster in Seattle. We're looking forward to seeing what fresh perspective you'll bring." My immediate team included Daniel, a photographer with an impressive client list; Sophia, an illustrator whose work I had admired for years; and Ryan, a copywriter with a knack for concise, impactful language. Unlike my experience with my family, they welcomed my input from day one, treating my ideas with genuine interest and respect. During that first week, I worked longer hours than required, determined to prove myself worthy of the opportunity. By Friday, I had already contributed significant concepts to 2 client pitches and received positive feedback from Natalie. "You don't need to work yourself to exhaustion, Octavio," she told me after noticing me still at my desk well past 7. "We hired you because we value your talent, not because we expect you to be the first in and last out." Her words struck a chord. How different from my father's persistent message that I needed to constantly prove my worth. As weeks turned into months, I settled into a rhythm in both my professional and personal life. At work, I gained confidence with each successful project. My designs for a rebranding campaign for a major financial tech company received particular attention, with the client specifically requesting that I lead the creative direction moving forward. Outside of work, I slowly built a new social circle. Daniel and I discovered a shared interest in street photography, often spending weekend mornings exploring different neighborhoods with our cameras. Sophia introduced me to a group of illustrators who met monthly to share techniques and critique each other's work. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who spoke my language, who understood and valued the creative process. Sarah and I maintained our relationship through daily video calls and monthly visits, Chalsend. She would fly to New York one month. I would return to Seattle the next. The distance was challenging but also clarifying. Without the shadow of my family situation hanging over us in New York, Sarah could see a different side of me, more confident, more at ease in my own skin. "You seem lighter here," she observed during her second visit. "Like you've put down a weight you've been carrying for years." She was right. Away from Seattle, away from the constant reminder of my status as the less favored son, I found myself standing taller, speaking more confidently, taking creative risks I might have previously avoided. 3 months after my move, my mother finally called. I had received brief text responses to my letter, but no real communication until now. "Octavio," she began, her voice hesitant. "How are you? We haven't heard from you in so long." "I'm doing well," I replied, surprised by my own calm. "The new job is challenging, but fulfilling. Your father and I were shocked when we got your letters," she continued. "We had no idea you felt so overlooked." I almost laughed at the understatement. I think you did know, Mom. You just didn't want to acknowledge it. She was silent for a moment. Perhaps you're right. It was easier to pretend everything was fine. Leo misses you terribly, by the way. He keeps asking when you'll visit. I'm not ready for that yet, I told her honestly. I'm still establishing myself here, building something that's just mine. I understand, she said, though I doubted she truly did. Well, we're here when you're ready. I noticed she didn't mention my father directly. I wondered if he even knew she had called. Leo was more persistent. His texts came regularly, updates about his life mixed with questions about New York and my new job. Unlike our parents, he seemed genuinely interested in my experiences. One message in particular caught me off guard. After you left, I started noticing what you'd been seeing all along. The way they talk about me versus you, the different standards, the gifts, the attention. You weren't imagining it, Octavio. I'm sorry I never saw it before. His acknowledgement meant more than I expected. We began talking more regularly after that, our relationship evolving into something more equal, no longer overshadowed by our parents' favoritism. 6 months into my new life, Archer and Wolf entered a major campaign in the American Design Awards. My concept formed the centerpiece of our submission, a bold, innovative approach to a public health initiative that combined traditional graphic elements with interactive digital components. When the campaign won in 2 categories, including Best Integrated Campaign, the agency celebrated with an office-wide party. Natalie made a point of highlighting my contribution in front of everyone. Octavio brought a fresh perspective that elevated this entire project, she announced, raising a glass in my direction. In just 6 months, he's become an indispensable part of our creative team. The recognition felt surreal after years of having my creative work dismissed as a hobby rather than a profession. The following week, I was promoted to senior designer with a substantial raise and my own small team to supervise. 9 months after leaving Seattle, my professional transformation was featured in a prominent design magazine. The article, titled Fresh Perspectives, Designers Reshaping the Industry, included an interview and samples of my work for Archer and Wolf. It was the kind of industry recognition I had always dreamed of, but never expected to achieve so quickly. 3 days after the article was published, my phone rang with a number I instantly recognized but had not seen in months. My father's. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Octavio. His voice sounded older, less commanding than I remembered. I saw the article about your work in New York. You read design magazines now? I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. Walter's daughter sent it to him. He forwarded it to me. A pause. The work looks impressive. I didn't realize your field had that kind of recognition. It wasn't quite an apology, not even close to an admission of wrongdoing. But from my father, acknowledging my work as impressive was unprecedented. Thank you, I said simply, unwilling to make this moment easier for him. Your mother and I have been discussing your letters, the things you wrote about how we treated you compared to Leo. Another pause. I'm not good at this, Octavio. Admitting mistakes isn't something I do easily. I'm aware of that. He cleared his throat. The agency you're working for, it seems very successful. And this promotion they've given you after less than a year. That's significant. It was as close as he would come to saying he'd been wrong about my career choice. For now, at least, it was enough. It is significant, I agreed. I'm building something here that I'm proud of. Good, he said awkwardly. That's good. We didn't speak long after that, but something had shifted. A crack had appeared in the wall of disapproval he had built between us. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was a beginning. 1 year to the day after I boarded that one-way flight from Seattle, I stood in my expanded Brooklyn apartment, now a 1-bedroom with enough space for a proper home office, looking out at the city that had become my sanctuary. The past 12 months had transformed my life in ways I could never have predicted when I opened that birthday card with its dismissive, maybe next year. Professionally, I had exceeded even my own expectations. My position as senior design lead at Archer & Wolf came with creative freedom and responsibility I had never experienced before. My team of 3 junior designers looked to me for guidance and mentorship, to a role I found unexpectedly fulfilling. Our recent campaign for a sustainable fashion brand had garnered industry awards and increased client inquiries. My personal life had undergone equally significant changes. After months of long-distance relationship, Sarah had decided to join me in New York. She had secured a teaching position at a progressive elementary school in Brooklyn and would be moving in with me at the end of the month. The thought of building a life together, away from the shadows of my family dynamics, filled me with quiet joy. My relationship with Leo had evolved into something healthier and more balanced. We spoke weekly, no longer performing the roles assigned to us by our parents, but instead connecting as 2 adults with different paths but mutual respect. He had visited twice, exploring New York with genuine enthusiasm and interest in my life here. I never realized how much pressure I was under until I saw how free you seem here, he had confessed during his last visit. Sometimes I wonder if I chose law because I wanted to, or because it was expected. My mother called regularly now, her conversations gradually becoming more authentic. She had visited once, without my father, and had seemed genuinely interested in understanding my work and life in New York. There was still a distance between us, but it was narrowing slowly. My father remained the most complicated relationship. After that first call following the magazine article, we had spoken sporadically. He never directly apologized for the years of favoritism or dismissal, but small acknowledgments slipped through occasionally. Comments about an advertisement he'd seen that reminded him of my style. Questions about the business side of design that indicated a grudging respect. As the anniversary of my departure approached, I made the decision to visit Seattle. It was time to face the past without being consumed by it. I booked a flight, arranged to stay with Marcus rather than my parents, and prepared myself emotionally for the reunion. Seattle greeted me with familiar rain and the scent of evergreens and coffee. Marcus picked me up at the airport, his familiar bear hug grounding me in the midst of swirling emotions. "Ready for the family reunion?" he asked as we drove toward the city. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied. The dinner at my parents' house was set for my second night in town. I spent the first day reconnecting with Marcus and Jessica, wandering through my old neighborhoods and visiting favorite haunts. It felt like visiting a previous life, familiar but no longer quite fitting, like clothes I had outgrown. When I arrived at my parents' waterfront home, Leo was already there, greeting me with a warm embrace. My mother hugged me with tears in her eyes, while my father offered a firm handshake that lingered a moment longer than necessary. Dinner was awkward at first, conversation stilted and careful. But as the evening progressed, something unexpected happened. My father, after 2 glasses of wine, cleared his throat during a lull in the conversation. "I've been doing some thinking since you left, Octavio," he said, his voice unusually subdued. "Reading those design magazines, looking at the work you're doing in New York, the clients you're attracting." I waited, not helping him through this difficult territory. "I was wrong," he said finally, the words clearly foreign to his tongue. "Wrong to dismiss your chosen field, wrong to measure your worth against your brothers, wrong to withhold support based on my own narrow definition of success." My mother reached for his hand, squeezing it supportively. "We both were," she added. "We failed to see the unique talents and gifts you brought to the table, and by comparing you constantly to Leo, we hurt both of our sons in different ways." Leo nodded in agreement. "They've been having some tough conversations since you left, Octavio, about patterns they didn't even realize they had created." The acknowledgement was powerful, healing in ways I hadn't expected. It didn't erase the years of pain, the birthdays overlooked, the achievements dismissed. but it created space for something new to grow in the place of old resentments. "Thank you for saying that," I said finally. "It matters to hear it." We didn't solve everything that night. Decades of family dynamics don't unravel in a single dinner. But we began the process of building a new type of relationship, one based on acceptance rather than expectation, on appreciation rather than comparison. Returning to New York after that visit, I felt a sense of closure and new beginnings simultaneously. The journey of healing would continue, but the heaviest weight had been lifted. I could now look forward without constantly glancing back. The lessons of the past year revealed themselves clearly now. Our worth is not determined by others' recognition, but by living authentically and courageously. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves is to create distance from those who cannot see our value. Real family, whether biological or chosen, supports rather than diminishes, celebrates differences rather than punishing them. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes a painful rejection, like a birthday card saying, "maybe next year," can be the catalyst for reclaiming your power and rewriting your story. That terse, dismissive card now sits framed in my office as a reminder, not of rejection, but of the moment I chose myself. The moment I decided that maybe next year wasn't good enough, that I deserved a present where I was valued and celebrated for exactly who I am. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between staying in a painful situation or taking a leap into the unknown? What helped you find the courage to make that decision? Your stories remind us that we're not alone in these struggles. Please share your experiences in the comments. Like this video if it resonated with you, and subscribe for more stories of personal growth and transformation. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is book that one-way flight toward the life you truly deserve.